Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
Good evening. It's Wednesday night, 9 p.m. I'm Rabbi from Goldberg, joined by my dear colleague and friend, Rabbi Joshua Broide, and we are here to take you
behind the Bima. You see, I was ready.
We're here to take you behind the Bima. We're coming to you live this Wednesday night. Erev, sort of Erev Yom Yerushalayim, Friday's Yom Yerushalayim. And we're grateful to Atara Konim, the incredible organization, and Yeshiva, and very excited about our guest tonight from Ir David, the city of David, Ze'ev Orenstein. Really amazing, really exciting to have him on. We love Yerushalayim. What a miracle. Yerushalayim, like who would object to the celebration of Yom Yerushalayim? After 2,000 years, an undivided, eternal capital of the Jewish people, Yerushalayim, access to our holiest place on earth that the world was created from, and the Torah in Yerushalayim, Kimitzion Teitei Sora, the amount of Torah being learned and taught and studied in Yerushalayim, and the light and the love of Yerushalayim, it's amazing. Such gratitude we have to have for Hashem.
Yeah, so, you wonder why it's not even a bigger celebration around the world and even in Israel. You would think, I mean, isn't it a commemoration, would you say, also of the 6 Day War? I mean, everyone felt so strong after the 6 Day War. We got it back. We got so many other things.
Yeah, what's interesting is that it's not like just the Haredim religiously don't celebrate. In fact, the Haredim are much more open to celebrating Yom Yerushalayim than they are Yom Ha'atzmaut. I saw a flyer for a Haredi event for Yom Yerushalayim this year online with major Rabbanim Gedolei Yisrael connecting to the theme and the gratitude and the miracle of Yom Yerushalayim. It's interesting that the majority of secular Israelis don't connect to it because for many, that's when we became occupiers. That's when we, Yeah,
but what's funny? Because back then, you and I weren't born yet, but they say in 1967, everyone, religious Jews, secular Jews, you could be living in Israel, you could be living in New York, and you walked around with such a sense of pride that
that was
the open hand of a Kodesh.
Right, but that's because of the miracle. But I think the political consequence, or what do we now do with the land, and what do we now do with these people, and how does this work? Where do we go from here? That was first beginning to unfold. So you remember they dug hundreds of thousands of graves in Israel. They thought this was the end of Israel. People were send your children to America to keep them alive, so there'll be a continuity.
Right, last one out, shut the lights.
Right.
They say that in Tel Aviv or something. It
was just an incredible miracle that we didn't just survive, but we absolutely were thriving. But I don't think as it unfolded, there was the understanding of the political ramifications and consequence. And as that began to unfold, that's when it became much more of a political hot button. And you have a majority probably of Israelis who look back at Yom Yerushalayim and don't necessarily see it as a day of celebration. First of all, it doesn't have the religious significance, United Yerushalayim, or access to the Kotel and Harabayas and so on. And aside from that, politically, it doesn't necessarily have. So not everybody is on board.
I was just listening to an interview. Brett Stevens was in our community recently, and I was listening to an interview he did, and someone asked him, how come it's not, we haven't moved things along quicker? He says, let me tell you, when America was founded, the United States of America, 75 years in, we were still owning slaves. He said that we were still, all these issues that you think, we're getting there. Just take it easy. Right. It took some time for America to get it together as well as a democracy, and we're still working on it.
Yeah, the problem is Israel's under a microscope as it's evolving and developing. It's going up against enemies, and it's going against haters, and it's under a microscope. So it doesn't have sort of that luxury, that flexibility. Not to say that America, the whole world was grateful and welcome, wanting it to come, but the American Revolution, and next week's guest, we're having. I don't know if we're having next week.
I might know, but I might not know.
Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom. We're going to do a coronation conversation. Learn more about the coronation. So practice your British accent. Remember the days you used to dress up depending who our guest was? It's like next week. I don't know. What would you wear?
Wear a top hat.
What would you wear for next week? Like drape yourself in a British flag?
No, but I'll be drinking my tea.
Scones. Drinking scones. Having a Reuben sandwich. A corned beef, a hot beef sandwich from Reuben's.
What else do they do in England?
That's all my British references I got right there.
I know. Got anything else?
That's it.
Can't wait. Chief Rabbis. I love it.
I was at a great wedding in New York last night.
Yeah, I know. I noticed. I'm still trying to wonder where you were.
There was a dear friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, So excited to be there. First of all, it's nice for me as a rabbi to just be at a wedding where I'm there as a friend. No other like identity.
No pressure.
But this friend of mine who's salt beef sandwiches. Thank you, Matthew. Salt beef. But this friend of mine, he is by far the person I know who's the most in touch with everybody. So we grew up together from when we were born. And I saw last night people I went to elementary school with. And my 6th grade Rebbe from Yavne Academy, Paramus, New Jersey was there.
It's the greatest.
For those who know, Rabbi Beller. I haven't seen Rabbi Beller since I graduated Yavne Academy in 1988. Right. It's unbelievable.
He's probably shepping such nachas when he's
that, and the friend is well connected, big rabbis and singers, and Eli Beer was there, Modi was there. It was just a very diverse and
Akiva Resnick, Rabbi
Akiva Resnick. We spoke a lot about you. So it was.
Well, I'll be going to his kola one day. So I already have. I've been admitted. I don't know what kind of bechinas you need to take to that kola, but I'm already in. Don't worry about it.
You're in. I was telling you how on fire you are with the learning, and the difference you're making, the impact that you're having. It's really great.
So funny.
Really exciting.
So great.
And I just want to give one shout out. We're going to bring our guest on momentarily, but I got to give a shout out because who picked me up and dropped me off? Our number one fan, Ben Isaacs.
Really?
So I was able to share with him some swag. Let's just say his car is now decked out with behind the Bima
he's
swag.
Probably so happy.
You see him around New Jersey. His energy, I just wanted to absorb some of that energy. He just is high energy, love.
Have you met him before?
High energy.
In person?
So we met once in person. We didn't spend time together. Let's put it this way. He got there, he was waiting for me. It took a while to get off the plane. By the time it came out, they usually like chase you away. He had been sitting there. Not only did they not chase him away, he had to introduce me to 2 or 3 of the people who chase you away, who are now like his best friends. And he's like, this is the rabbi I was telling you about. He's here now. Thanks for letting me stay there. Just energy. When you're high energy and you're friendly and you're warm and you care and you know somebody's name and you're amazing.
Let's just say we had some good times back in Camp Masora, lifeguards.
You and Ben Isaacs?
Back in the day, yeah. He was a year older than me, but we were in the same year.
I want you to know something. I'm still flying high on his energy just from having spent a little bit of time with him. So it was exciting. Yeah, it was good stuff. Anything else you want to share before we have our conversation?
Yom Yerushalayim. Let's celebrate. I don't know. We should make a l'chaim right now. Do I have anything? I don't know if I got anything there.
So Yerushalayim should be safe and secure. No rockets, no terrorism. Should have unity and love and respect and a bright future.
Simone's in Yerushalayim right now with a group of women on one of the Momentum trips.
Yeah.
And I think the scariest part, she left on Sunday, was right as they announced the ceasefire. But the fact now that you started seeing rockets that are capable, it sounds like, of reaching Yerushalayim, which is putting people in bomb shelters now, it's very scary.
Yeah.
I didn't think they would ever reach that far into the country. But
we always wonder because those terrorists, a rocket could hit Al-Aqsa. It could hit Jerusalem. It could hit. Right, those are very inexact rockets. So
very inexact.
They're willing to risk supposedly their own people, so to say.
Right. I guess all of our enemies throughout the years have been willing to risk themselves and risk everything. Just their hatred is pathological. So.
Speaking of high energy, Ze'ev Orenstein has a lot of energy.
He's got a lot of energy.
Learn about his story and how he got involved in Ir David. If you haven't been to Ir David, it's amazing because when we talk about Yom Yerushalayim, right, what we think about is like the Inbal and the Plaza and the David Citadel and the I'm not so fancy. I never stayed there. What's the Waldorf? Or you think about the Kaisel, the Kotel, or Harbat, but none of those are like the real original Yerushalayim. Right. So when we talk about Yom Yerushalayim, we wanted to have a conversation about the original OG Yerushalayim, and for that we bring on Ze'ev Orenstein. Ze'ev, thank you for coming behind the Bima in honor of Yom Yerushalayim, a special Yom Yerushalayim edition of Behind the Bima to learn more about and talk Ir David, which doesn't get more ancient central Yerushalayim than Ir David. Thank you for all your great work, and thank you for going behind the Bima.
Thanks for having me.
So Ze'ev, talk to us. Ir David, for those who've never visited or toured, it's remarkable to see what's going on over there. Where is Ir David relative to, let's say, the Kotel or the Kosel, whatever you call it? Who hasn't been to Israel and visited and daven there? Where is Ir David, and when did those excavations begin? And tell us a little bit about Ir David.
So the amazing thing is, up until 150 years ago, when people would think, where is the original biblical city of Yerushalayim, the city of David Melech, of King David, of Shlomo Melech, of the prophets, the Nevi'im like Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu, like Jeremiah and Isaiah, everyone thought it's obvious. It's the old city of Jerusalem, surrounded by the iconic old city walls.
Right.
Except the old city walls, they're old, certainly by American standards. They're about 500 years old. But Yerushalayim is about 4,000 years old. David HaMelech, King David, goes back about 3,000 years. So in Jerusalem, we don't get overly excited by 500-year-old anything. But until 1867, everyone thought the old city of Jerusalem was biblical Jerusalem. Until Queen Victoria of England, she wants to discover the treasures of the Bible, like the Ark of the Covenant, think Indiana Jones movie. And she sends a man by the name of Captain Charles Warren to the Holy Land, to the land of Israel, to find those treasures. He comes to Jerusalem. And if you're going to search one place in all of Yerushalayim to find the treasures of the Bible, of the Tanakh, you're going to go to Jerusalem. You're going to go to Har Moriah, the Temple Mount. And that's the spot where, of course, we know the Tanakh tells us that the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, takes place there. That's the spot. Today you have 2 Islamic shrines, Al-Aqsa Mosque and Dome of the Rock. And according to our belief, the rock that's being referred to when we speak of the Dome of the Rock, that's the Even HaShtiyah, the foundation stone, the center of all creation. And that's the spot where King David will have his son, Shlomo, build the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, which is why Har Moriah becomes known as Har Habayit, the Temple Mount. Except when Charles Warren comes 150 years ago and he wants to dig up the Temple Mount, the Ottomans, the Muslims are there, and they say, Charles, we're sure you're a great guy, but you're not going to dig up the Temple Mount. And to this day, there's been virtually no archaeological activity on the Temple Mount due to religious sensitivities, political sensitivities. And so Charles Warren says, I can't go back to the Queen empty-handed. And so he says, if I can't dig on the Temple Mount, I'll dig near it. He comes just south of the Temple Mount, walking through the Kidron Valley, and he stumbles across an ancient spring known as the Gihon Spring. It's been flowing from today, going back thousands and thousands of years, and it's flowing through an ancient man-made tunnel. If anyone who's listening has visited Ir David before, they've almost certainly walked through Hezekiah's water tunnel. He doesn't know anything about Hezekiah's water tunnel. All he sees is a spring flowing through an ancient man-made tunnel dating back some 2,700 years. He begins to walk through it, wondering where it leads, and he ends up, through his explorations, coming up with a theory, which is everyone believes that the original biblical city of Jerusalem, the city of David, the place where Jerusalem began, everyone believes it's inside the walls of the old city. Charles Warren says, I believe everyone's wrong. And he says, I believe the original biblical city of Jerusalem, the city of David, is not inside the walls of the old city, but actually just outside the walls of the old city. And when he announces his theory to the world, scholar and layman alike say, Charles, that is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. Of course, it's the old city. Why? Because the city of David that we know today, the modern mixed Jewish-Arab neighborhood of the city of David, 150 years ago, it was a barren ridge. There was nothing there. They say, Charles, you're telling us the Jerusalem that has significance, not to millions of people, but to billions of people, is this barren hilltop? It can't be. It has to be the old city. He says, I'm telling you, this is a spot.
Like it's called the old city. Duh, it's in the old city.
It's the old city, but it's not the oldest city. Let's put it that way. If you're looking for the OG Jerusalem, the original Jerusalem of King David, it's not inside the walls of the old city, but outside. And today, the city of David is one of the most archaeologically excavated sites in the world, the most excavated site in all of Israel. And today, everyone knows that Charles Warren was, in fact, correct, that the original biblical Yerushalayim, the Yerushalayim where the kings of the Bible ruled and the prophets of the Bible preached, is not inside the walls of the old city, but just outside. So you're talking about from the Kotel, 5-minute walk, just outside the Dung Gate. You walk down the hill and you're at your
to give a perspective, right? If the Kotel's in front of you and to the right is the bus stop outside and that plaza gathering area, you keep going out the old city gate from there, and you go down that hill.
Take a left and then a right.
Yeah, so you're facing the Kotel. We're talking this city of David is to the right and down the hill, and it's in the middle of a Arab, today what is called Palestinian area. Is it safe? Is it secure? People be nervous? Are there Jews living there as well? I mean, I remember that people would be nervous to walk even that 5-minute walk down that hill. You're no longer in the old city. You're no longer in the Jewish quarter. You're no longer in the shawarma falafel, Rugelach area. Now you're what feels like foreign territory. So what's the safety situation there?
Safety situation is Baruch Hashem, totally fine. We are on pace for, I think, maybe our best year ever, tourism-wise. We're past pre-COVID numbers. We're going to hit over 1 million visitors to Ir David this year.
Wow.
So Baruch Hashem, people are coming from all over. And yeah, as you mentioned, it is in Eastern Jerusalem. So when the world talks about, well, maybe East Jerusalem should be a capital of a future Palestinian state, when they talk about, and I've had the privilege and the work that I do for Ir David, with meeting with many dignitaries and politicians and heads of state and so on, sharing with them the significance of Ir David and Yerushalayim. And one of the things that I found when I'm meeting with members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, ambassadors, and so on, is that when they think of what they would call East Jerusalem, they're thinking of Gaza, they're thinking of Ramallah. Right. They don't realize that the Kotel is East Jerusalem. They don't realize that Har Ze'etim, the Mount of Olives, is East Jerusalem. Ir David is East Jerusalem. Right. And for the Christians, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or the Stations of the Cross, or the Southern Steps, all those things are in the eastern part of Jerusalem. And so, I say to those officials, I say, look, I said, every place in Jerusalem that makes Jerusalem significant for billions of people around the world is in Eastern Jerusalem. I said, the only time in the last 2,000 years when people of all faiths and backgrounds have been able to access their heritage sites, their holy places in Jerusalem, has been the last 55 years of Israeli sovereignty. It's very easy, sitting in the United States, whether it's Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, and saying, freedom of worship, freedom of access, freedom of religion. It's easy to say that in the United States. But in the Middle East, no one takes those values for granted because once you leave Israel, once you leave Jerusalem, it's really hard to find them in the region. And so we're very proud that Yerushalayim is a place where everyone can get to. Everyone can get to the places they want to go. And certainly the Jewish people, when we think of why Yerushalayim matters to us so much, we're talking about Yom Yerushalayim, it starts in Ir David. I mean, literally, David HaMelech never put a note between the stones of the Kotel. David HaMelech never walked through the Jewish quarter of the Old City. How do I know that? Because it didn't exist in the time of David HaMelech. It didn't exist in the time of Shlomo Melech or Chizkiyahu HaMelech. They were all hanging out in Ir David.
So Ze'ev, it's not just an important place to the Jewish people or to Israel. The last U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, happens to be a Boca resident and a past guest on Behind the Bima. One of the last things I think he did as ambassador, and I think he said on Behind the Bima that he did it without anyone's approval, was he declared Ir David a significant place for America? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So what's very special, I mean, Ambassador Friedman, I would say that if there's one person, certainly aside from the founder of the City of David, David LeBerry, but if there's one person outside of the City of David organization who can take credit over the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years for really bringing the significance of the City of David to the attention of millions of people around the world and some of the most powerful and influential people in the world, it is to the credit of Ambassador David Friedman and so many of the people who work together with him on his team. I know you've had, I think, Ari Lightstone on Behind the Bima also, someone who gets a lot of credit for what's happened. But one of the last things that the administration did is recognize the City of David not as a Jewish heritage site or an Israeli heritage site, but inside the City of David, right next to the entrance, there's a huge plaque with a giant American flag on it, talking about the significance of the City of David to America. And they say, why is the City of David significant to America? But I think one of the things that the previous administration understood was that the foundation, the bedrock that America is built upon, that the founding fathers understood, it rests upon what's called the Judeo-Christian heritage. Now, where does that heritage come from? And what the founding fathers of America understood, and what the previous administration understood, is that the heritage that we are unearthing in the City of David is not just significant to the Jewish people or to Israel, but it's significant to hundreds of millions of Americans. The bedrock of what makes America America, those values are rooted in the City of David and what we're unearthing in the City of David. And that's why I've told many members of Congress and Senate and leaders in America that when the United Nations, when the Palestinian leadership, when they deny the heritage of Jerusalem, when they say that the Jewish people, and by extension Christians, have no heritage, no history in Jerusalem, that we're occupiers, that we're colonizers, that we're thieves, I say to them, they're not just attacking the Jewish people in Israel, they're attacking you, America, because they're saying if our heritage is not real in Jerusalem, then neither is yours. And that means that the heritage that America is built upon isn't real either. And therefore, you should be standing up for Jerusalem and her heritage, not because you want to be pro-Israel, which is nice and it's appreciated, but because you're pro-America, because you're standing up for your own identity, for your own history, for your own heritage. And therefore, we are in this together. And I think that's something that Ambassador Friedman certainly appreciated and understood. And that's why we have that plaque sitting in the entrance of the city of David today.
And we're certainly grateful to the ambassador, to REA for their incredible work, for their friendship for our community, but their incredible work there. It must make it even more aggravating to you, Ze'ev, that so recently Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian member of Congress, I wouldn't label her Palestinian as much as being anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, wanted to hold a Nakba day, and the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, prevented her from doing so using the House. And shockingly, beyond disappointingly, who was the one who found her space and gave her cover and embraced her physically, quite literally, affectionately, was a Jew, Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's unbelievable. You can have Jewish heritage, Jewish lineage, and Yisrael Alpha Pi Shechata Yisrael, who a Jew is a Jew always, but a Jew who lacks a Jewish heart and a Jewish soul and Jewish values, and is aligning themselves with a Jew hater, it's just so unbelievably, unbearably painful. So is it hard for you to think and to imagine that there's an elected leader, a member of Congress, somebody who's voting and influencing U.S. policy, who can be so backwards? And there's a senator, a U.S. senator, a Jewish U.S. senator, who doesn't understand their own Jewish heritage, Jewish tradition, Jewish background. You're talking about outsiders. You're talking about enemies who are challenging Israel and by extension the U.S. We're talking about U.S. leaders. We're talking about Jews who themselves don't get it. And I guess that's a big part of your work as the Director for International Affairs, really a spokesperson to elected leaders, to the media. How do you feel about that?
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, maybe that's sad, but it does not surprise me. I think that when one looks at the world today, and certainly America today, it seems that there is a shift that is going on, both within the Jewish community, but also broadly, that I don't think we could take for granted America's support for Israel. It doesn't mean that there aren't great organizations and great leaders who are still very, very strong, but I don't think it is something as American as baseball and apple pie. I think maybe there was a time where it was just taken as a given that, of course, everyone's going to be pro-Israel. I don't think that's the case anymore. Right. As far as whether it's upsetting or not, I think I heard this at some point growing up, and I still believe it to today. When you're talking about doing big things in the world, if no one is opposing you, if no one is fighting back against you, then probably what you're doing doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, we certainly believe that and feel that in the Rabbit, no question. Rabbi Broide, I wanted to hand it to you, but just one other question first, Ze'ev. I'm sorry, Rabbi Broide. Now I'm going to get all the email and listener feedback about how I don't let Broide speak. But the biggest fan of my not letting Rabbi Broide speak is Rabbi Broide. He's always encouraging me, just run with it. But anyway, so could you share with us an experience or any experiences that come to mind of some of these elected officials or media personalities? Is there somebody who was unfamiliar or ignorant on the history of Jerusalem who, when you gave them that tour, was like blown away and became a big advocate that jumps out? And is there somebody who was the most hostile or adversarial, an elected leader, Jew or non-Jew or media personality, when you gave them that tour or you were speaking on behalf of the city of David, they were really adversarial and really, really confronting you?
So, I won't name names on the negative side, but I will say that we've had the privilege. One of the most surprising figures that I have gotten to lead in the city of David multiple times, who is another guest on Behind the Bima, is Congressman Richie Torres. And when a person looks at Congressman Richie Torres, in terms of his background, super progressive, probably on many, many issues, we're going to see things differently. And yet I would say that certainly on the Democrat side, he's probably the most outspoken pro-Israel member of Congress. And I remember someone said to me after I had one of my meetings with him in D.C., he said, it's a shame that he's not a Republican. I said, are you crazy? I said, he's worth 200 Republicans. I said, thankfully, and it's not to take it for granted, but on the Republican side, being pro-Israel is kind of, just what you are in terms of what it means to be a Republican today. But on the Democrat side, it's not a given for sure. And to have someone so outspoken, and he's outspoken than many Republicans also on this issue. And so that's someone who he's spoken about his experience walking along the pilgrimage road, having ash from 2,000 years ago from the Khurban, from the destruction of Jerusalem, putting it on his hand and the impact that had on him. So that was something that for me is just, it's very easy to label people, be like, okay, this person's going to be a Republican or a Democrat, and you start expecting, what it's going to be like. And to see that, you take a person like Richie Torres, and that on paper, you would think he would be with AOC, he would be with the Squad. And yet he's super strong and outspoken. And
self-labeled progressive. Yeah. What about at stations as CNN, MSNBC, Fox News? They come.
So I'll tell you, we had recently the beginning of the excavation on the phase 2 of the Shiloach pool, the Pool of Siloam excavation, which we could talk about the significance of what that site is. But I was doing a live interview on Fox and Friends, and as soon as you have live TV, people gather around. So we're standing in the Shiloach pool excavation, and people are gathering around, and we're doing this Fox and Friends live interview. And as soon as the interview finishes, there is some Muslim tour guide. And this Muslim tour guide, he's with a group, and he shouts down to me. He says, well, what should the Palestinians feel about what's happening here right now? It wasn't what I was planning to talk about. Fox and Friends is a friendly outlet. And, my focus was on talking about all the amazing things that are happening. And the cameras could still be rolling. Who knows? You still have the journalists who are there, and everyone's watching it. And I thought for a second, okay, well, what am I going to say to this person now? And I feel like Hashem, as he does, I'd like to think on many occasions, just puts words in my mouth. And I said, well, what should the Palestinians feel? I said, they should feel happy. I said, this is a great day for anyone who loves Jerusalem, because one of the most significant heritage sites in all of Jerusalem, with significance to billions of people, is about to be unearthed and made accessible to anyone who wants to connect with Jerusalem and her heritage. And therefore, I would say, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, you should be celebrating today. It's a great day. I don't think it was the answer this person was expecting, but I think it's true. I think that if you can get past the politics and just talk about the significance of being able to unearth a place, that how many places today, when you think of a person who goes to the pyramids, they go to the Colosseum, say, okay, great. Once upon a time, there were the pharaohs. Look at the grandeur of the pharaohs. Look at the might of the great Roman Empire. But then a person says, where are the pharaohs today? Where is the great Roman Empire today? And the answer is the same. Museums, history books with some monuments left behind. A person comes to Ir David. They walk through, say, the Pilgrimage Road excavation, which we could talk about. And you're literally walking in the footsteps of the Bible, in the footsteps of our people from thousands of years ago. The people who worship the same God, spoke the same language, had the same customs, traditions, festivals as our ancestors did from thousands of years ago. This is not just a piece of history. It's the continuation of a story that is not less relevant today than it was thousands of years ago. And where else in the world do you have that? And the answer is you don't, but you have it in Yerushalayim. You have it in the city of David, the place where Jerusalem began. And that is something that for me, at least, and I think the people that I am privileged to share it with, it's something that is just different, that it's different from almost any other place in the world. Where there's a lot of places, you go to Rome, you go to Greece, you say, okay, great. There's a lot of history here, but that history is not particularly relevant to how we are going to live our lives today or tomorrow. A person comes to Yerushalayim, they come to the city of David. Yes, there's a lot of history, and it's inspiring in terms of what happened in the past. But what happened in the past is very, very relevant for what is going to happen both today and tomorrow, not just for the Jewish people, but for billions of people around the world who view Yerushalayim as a source of meaning and faith and identity and purpose.
Absolutely. Rabbi Broide.
Well, listen, I love Ir David. It's always a stop on every trip that we take with different groups. And I'm just wondering, because I'm also like an archaeologist. I like to go and dig every now and again. You never know what you might find. But for people that are listening, people want to know, are there artifacts that you found that you can identify and you can say, this relates in some way to the Tanakh, to the Bible. We found absolute evidence that something like this happened in this location. But I'm also wondering at the opposite. Like now you've got a theory and it's working for sometimes years, many years, and then you find something else and it seems to, you got to walk it back, or do you walk it back? Because like, how do you don't want to change the story. Right? It was working. So how does that work?
So I can tell you, as someone who shares, guides in a certain sense, the city of David a lot for these dignitaries and officials, we have our guiding books and we have our stories. And I can tell you that every year or two, I have to get a new guiding book because one, there are new discoveries, Baruch Hashem, thank God. But at the same time, as you're saying, we believed certain things and we have, let's say, certain renderings. Oh, this is how it would have looked thousands of years ago. And all of a sudden the archaeologists will come up with a new discovery or a new theory. And they're like, well, that thing that's in your guiding book, it's not actually accurate. One time I was leading someone on a tour and I saw parallel to the tour I was giving. There was Roni Reich, who is one of the most famous modern day archaeologists in Jerusalem. And he's giving his own tour. And I felt very, very self-conscious because I was close enough that I figure he could hear every word I'm saying, and he must be saying to himself, like, who is this idiot who is saying all the, but we're doing fine. I'm getting through most of the tour. And at some point he finally like jumps in and catches me on something that if you would have said to me, like, I would have said, on this point, I'm on 100% solid ground. And I said to him, I said, like, this, what are you talking about? Like, we've been saying this for forever. He says, yeah, but it's a new theory. And I said, look, it's not fair. Like, we can't keep up with all your theories. He said, with archaeologists, it's not the future, but the past that's always changing. So anyway, so you're right. It is challenging, but it's also exciting because if you go to a place like Masada, which is, I'm sure people listening to this show, whoever's been to Israel, they've been to Masada. It's an incredible place. But if you were in Masada 20 years ago and you're there today and you're there 20 years from now, it's not changing. It's been 99% excavated. We know what Masada is, and that's great. Ir David is not that. Literally every single day, we are unearthing antiquities, fancy word for old stuff, that shows that the connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem is not simply a matter of faith, but a matter of fact. That literally you could say when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. I'll give you a couple of examples. And the first example that I'll give you is not even an archaeological one per se, in terms of not pulling something out of the ground. But in Tehillim, in the Psalms, David HaMelech writes, Yerushalayim harim savivla. Psalm 125, Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. Beautiful poetry. But why does David HaMelech choose that description for Yerushalayim? So if you're standing on the lookout point of Ir David, you look to the north and you see Har Bayit, Har Moriah. You look to the east, you see Har Ze'ev, the Mount of Olives. You look to the south, you see the ridge of Armon Natziv. And you look to the west, you see what people refer to today as Har Zion, Mount Zion. So you say, great, Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. But then you say, well, wait a second. Up until 150 years ago, everyone actually believes that the old city is biblical Jerusalem. Now, what's the problem? If you're standing in the old city, those same words, Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains, it's poetry. It sounds beautiful, but it doesn't make any sense because when you're standing in the old city, Jerusalem is not surrounded by mountains. There's literally one place on the planet where those words of David HaMelech, of the Tehillim, make any sense. And that's when you're standing in Ir David. When you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. Because when you're standing on that lookout point near David, it's the only place in the world where you could say, wait a second, Yerushalayim harim savivla. Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. But I'll give you an example of a small discovery now and a big discovery. Small discovery. You have people, we said earlier ago, UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They passed a resolution in 2016, and they, updated every year or so, saying that Jerusalem is significant, that the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, are in fact significant places, just not to anyone listening to Behind the Bima, and not to our Christian friends either. They say it's significant only to Islam. And that's interesting, given all the archaeology and the history. But they say, okay, Jerusalem is only significant to Islam, and they condemn the archaeological excavations. I say, why would anyone condemn archaeology? I mean, why would anyone talk about archaeology? It's not, for most people, that interesting. But they realize that if you allow the excavations in Ir David to take place, then the whole story that Yerushalayim is only Islamic is going to be burst in a second. So if we go back about a decade ago, Dr. Eilat Mazar, the late Dr. Eilat Mazar, Leah Shalom, she's digging in the city of David. She's responsible for, in 2005, she comes up with a theory that where a visitor center used to be standing was in fact the location of the palace belonging to David HaMelech. And she unearthed beneath our visitor center a massive structure, which many believe and agree with her that it was the palace of David HaMelech. And others say, well, maybe it's not the palace of David HaMelech. Maybe it's a century after David, which means it was the palace of Malchut Beit David, which again is not keeping me awake at night. Whether David was there or Rechavam was there, it's all right, right? Meaning it was the original capital.
It's cool either way.
Yeah. Now, what does she find a couple of years ago? She finds 2 clay seals. Now, in ancient times, today we take it for granted. You want to send a WhatsApp, an iMessage, email. There's encryption and encoding to ensure that the only people who are going to read this message are the intended recipients, and probably the Chinese and the Russians. But aside from that, but imagine 2,500 years ago, you need to send a secure message to someone. You don't have the ability to encrypt it and encode it, and you can't deliver it yourself. So what are you going to do? You're going to write your letter, and then you're going to roll it up and tie it up. And then you're going to take a small piece of clay. And even that, most people say wax. And we'll talk about why it's providence that it was clay and not wax, but a small piece of clay, and you're going to put it on the knot. Then you're going to take your ring and you're going to stick it into the clay. Now on your ring and now on the clay is your name and then son or daughter of your father's name. You know, hand this letter to the messenger. The messenger delivers it. Now, when you receive this letter, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to look at the seal. Make sure it's not broken. Dr. Mazar is digging in Ir David, and she finds 2 small clay seals. And she says there are names on the seals, and the names on the seals appear in the Tanakh, in the Bible. But not only do these seals dating back 2,500 years ago appear in the Tanakh, they appear with Hebrew names on them. And she says not only do the names appear in the Tanakh, they appear in the same book, the same Sefer Yirmiyahu, the book of Jeremiah. Not only do they appear in the same book, they appear in the same chapter, Jeremiah 38. Wow. Not only in the same chapter, the names on the seals found in this excavation in Ir David appear in the same pasuk, in the same verse. Yirmiyahu Lamed Chet pasuk Aleph, Jeremiah 38, verse 1. Not only do the names on the seals appear in that same verse, they appear in that verse back to back. Now, who are these people on the seals? You have, if you look in, you can check it out when you're listening to this. You can pause and open up your Tanakh to Jeremiah 38, verse 1, and you're going to see the first pasuk lists 4 government officials. These were the 4 officials that make up the security cabinet for Tzidkiyahu Melech, King Tzedkiah, the last king of the Davidic dynasty. And they had advice for the king because there was some guy running around Yerushalayim, running around Ir David. His name was Yirmiyahu, telling everyone to surrender to the Babylonians. And nobody likes this guy. They think he's a traitor. And so the advisors go to the king and say, we got to get rid of this guy. We got to kill him. And so we find on the seals, you have the names Gedaliah, son of Pashhur, Juchal, son of Shlemiah, 2 of the 4 ministers of Tzidkiyahu Melech that wanted to kill Yirmiyahu, the prophet. And what's amazing is where were they found? In the area that archaeologists believe was the royal government center of the Davidic dynasty, where the ministers of the king would be hanging out. Even more specifically, where were the seals found? In an ash layer with antiquities dating back to the period of the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. So you have the right people at the right place at the right time. All in an excavation that a couple of years ago was still underground. Now, a few feet away from there, Dr. Mazar was still digging, and she finds 2 more seals. And the names on these seals, I promise, are names that many of your listeners are going to be well aware of. The first seal she finds, dating back 2,700 years, the name on the seal in Hebrew is Chizkiyahu ben Achaz Melech Yehuda. Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. Chizkiyahu Melech, one of the most righteous kings of the entire Tanakh. Next to that seal, she finds another seal. 2 words in Hebrew on the seal. First word is Yeshayahu, Isaiah. Second word in Hebrew is Navi, the prophet Isaiah, the Navi Yeshayahu, right next to his wingman, Chizkiyahu Melech, King Hezekiah.
Where's that seal now? Who's got that seal? What's it worth?
What's it worth? I mean, it's one of those things. What is it? Like the MasterCard commercials? For some things, whatever, but priceless. I mean, you can but the amazing thing is,
where's it stored? Is it near David? Is it in
one day we're actually building a place we're going to store antiquities found near David by us. It's in museums. I think some are in the Israel Museum, some are traveling around the world. But here's two amazing things I think about this. Oftentimes, people say, well, if the seals must have been made out of wax. Now, how was Yerushalayim destroyed? It was burned, right? Burned to the ground. Had the seals been made out of wax, they would have melted. We would not have them today. Clay hardens in fire, right? They were preserved. Now, if you think about it, had the seals been found 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, we wouldn't know about it today. Almost certainly, they'd be lost to history. It's almost as if, to take a line from Megillat Esther, from the book of Esther, we are, up until a century ago, much of the world, certainly the Western world, you could say was a God-fearing or believing world. They believed in the divinity of the Bible, of Tanakh. Over the last century, and we see it certainly today in full steam, much of the world is no longer a believing world. You can't find a university campus almost anywhere in the world today without at least a course, if not a whole department, on biblical criticism, denying the authenticity of the Tanakh. And the amazing thing is that we find now these seals, literally over the last couple of years, and every single day we're finding more stuff in Ir David. It's as if it was waiting for a time such as this. Le'et kazot, right, is if Hashem said, you know what, it says that Hashem creates the refuah before the sickness. And so those seals were lying in wait for 2,500 years.
What a Yom Yerushalayim story. I mean, that is Yom Yerushalayim, that Hashem was protecting and preserving it for when we would come home, we would be there, right. We would uncover it, and everything's in the right time. Ze'ev, tell us a little bit about Ze'ev. Where did you grow up, and how did you get to be the spokesperson, the director for international affairs of Yom Yerushalayim? What was your trajectory and story to get to this point? Did you know as a child that you were going to be fighting on behalf of Jerusalem?
As a child, I actually wanted to either be an archaeologist or a marine biologist. So maybe the archaeology part. Truth is, I grew up in the okay state of New Jersey. I don't know if it's a great state, but it's certainly okay. And I went to, yeshiva day school growing up.
Where'd you grow up? What city?
Grew up in East Brunswick. Went to RPRY, then JEC. I think it's
That's
RCA
right.
now in Elizabeth.
There we go. JEC had to come up.
Right.
JEC right here.
There you go. And now from there, I go for my year in Israel. I go to Mivaseret. And, truthfully, growing up, Israel was not a big thing for me. RPRY, we would have falafel and Yom Ha'atzmaut. I remember JEC, and I'm not knocking JEC, but I remember the head of JEC at the time would get up on Yom Ha'atzmaut and say, today we do like Ben Gurion. We're not going to say Tachanun. We're not going to say Hallel. I'm making you. Anyway, that was pretty much my Israel knowledge through high school, and came from a gap year in Israel. And I remember we had a Shabbat in the old city of Jerusalem, and a rabbi, his name is Rabbi Mori Rubel. He gets up and he's talking about 80 of us and his experiences growing up in the 6-Day War. And he's telling us how, the countries surrounding Israel are very proudly, openly in Arabic and English and in whatever language, saying they are going to destroy Israel. And in Israel, they were converting parks into future mass graves. And there was a joke in the country at the time, the last person to leave the airport, turn off the lights. And the Jews of America were begging the Jews of Israel, send the children to America so that, in the event that Israel's destroyed, there'll be a surviving remnant. And I'm sitting there listening, and something is just not sitting right with me. I'm thinking, how could it be? My parents spent lots and lots of money they did not have to give me a good Jewish education. And I knew about FDR's New Deal. I knew about the French Revolution and the Roman Renaissance. And I knew about, the Holocaust. But the return of my people to the land of Israel, Kibbutz Galiot, ingathering the exiles, making the desert bloom, the revival of the Hebrew language, amazing, miraculous military victories, reestablishing a flourishing Jewish sovereign nation in our homeland. Like, how come nobody taught me any of this stuff? How could it be that I don't know a word about what he's talking about this incredible story? And so I went over to him afterwards, and I said, I want to know more about what you're talking about. Can you recommend? And this is like pre-internet days, 1997, no Amazon yet. I said, could you recommend a book, something that I could learn more about this? So he recommends a book, O Jerusalem.
Sure.
And somehow I managed to track this book down, and I take off the next 3 days. I just take off from yeshiva. I just sit in my room. I'm reading this book. And for the first time in my life, I said, wait a second. I said, there actually is like Hashem is real. Now you would say to me, well, I don't understand. You're Shomer Shabbos, you keep kosher, you've been going to yeshiva day school your whole life. Like, what do you mean that okay, Hashem is real? So you say, well, why were you doing all this stuff if you didn't really believe? And I said, well, if I would have been born in Alabama, I'd have probably been a good Christian. If I had been born in Saudi Arabia, I'd probably be a good Muslim. I happen to have been born into an Orthodox Jewish family, in an Orthodox Jewish community. So I did Orthodox Jewish people things. I never really thought about it much beyond that. And if you push me, but why do we do it? So, okay, well, thousands of years ago, Hashem took us out of Egypt. He gave us the Torah, did all these things for us. And so out of gratitude for that, we still do all these things today. But if you would have asked me then, but today, like, is Hashem still actively part of this world, caring about Am Yisrael and our mission? And honestly, I would have said, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no. It's not really something I thought much about. And I read this book, and I was like, wow, like both in the positive and the negative. People who have been exiled from their land 2,000 years later don't come back. I mean, people, once a language goes out of use, it does not come back. People who are, just out of the ashes of Auschwitz don't have miraculous military victories. these things don't happen just by itself. And the
Right.
flip side, the fact that if I were to build a little extension onto my home in Ma'ale Adumim, that it would be above the fold news in the New York Times, and the UN Security Council would convene about it, that's also not normal. And so you take all these things together, it's like, wait a second, like there really is, like Hashem is still an active part of this world, and he
Right.
cares about what's happening to the Jewish people and what we're doing here. And that led me reading that book to another book to another book. And when I got to Yeshiva University after my year in Israel, I figured everyone there would just be Zionists. It was just a bastion of Zionism. And I go to the first Israel Club event, and there were, I think, 30 people. And, probably most of them were there either because there was free pizza or it was co-ed. And then I remember they had, towards the end of the year, they had a program for Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And you had about 300 people show up for it. And I was, again, conflicted. I said, wow, it's nice that like hundreds of people are showing up. But then part of me thought, it's like, wow, it's like a Zionist high holidays that you see these people once a year and you'll see them again next year, but nothing in between. And the following year, I took over.
Right, I never heard Yom HaAtzmaut described that way, as Zionist high holidays.
So anyway, the following year, I take over running the Israel Club at YU. I ran it the next 3 years. And my goal in running it was to try and make it more, to use a word from today, but it meant something different back then, but more inclusive. To find ways to help different people feel like they could, you don't have to be Kippah Struga. You don't have to be super religious Zionist. You could, I remember Yom HaZikaron, I would go around to the various Batei Midrash in Yeshiva University and where all the shiurim were held. And I put up signs saying, dedicate your learning today for those who fell on behalf of defending Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. You don't have to be a Zionist to do that. Just sit in the Beit Midrash, but say, you know what, today, my learning is recognizing the tens of thousands of people who have given their lives so that the Jewish people could live in our homeland. And little things like that, just trying to find ways to, didn't matter who you were, help people connect. And I remember the last program I ran was that same Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut program. And we had like 1,300, 1,500 people showed up, pouring out onto the streets. And I remember that night at that event, I was davening Arvit. And in the Shema Kolenu part of the Shemona Esrei, I put in a personal request. And I said, Hashem, I said, look, I said, I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. I said, what do I want to do with my life? I want to dedicate my life to connecting people to Israel. And I don't need to be rich. I don't need a big house. I don't need fancy cars or anything like that. I said, just let me please be able to support my family honorably doing this. And it struck me at that moment. There's this strange Mishnah. I always found it strange in Pirkei Avot, which says schar mitzvah mitzvah and schar avera avera. It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, imagine, you do a term paper in university and you work really hard, and the professor comes and says, well, you deserve an A, but I'm actually going to let you just write another term paper. Like, well, no thanks. I'll just take the A. And so, like, what does it mean? The reward for doing a mitzvah is another mitzvah. And in that moment, when I said that tefillah, when I made that bakasha to Hashem, I said, wait a second. Like, for me, what's the reward for what I do? It's getting to do what I do. That I every year during Elul and the Yamim Noraim, one of the things I ask Hashem for is I view it that I get a 1-year contract. Yes, we all do in general, but specifically for what I do for Ir David. People ask me all the time, well, how'd you get this position? And I say to them, I said, a very short answer. I said it, I point up to Shemayim. I say, Hashem, for whatever reason, put me in this position. I can't say I know why, but just to be worthy of being a person. About 15 years ago, I came across a pasuk in Tehillim. For some reason, it resonated with me. It says, "V'adabra dotecha neged melachim v'lo evosh." I will speak your testimonies before kings and not be ashamed. I don't know why that verse struck me, but I put it as part of my email signature. This is easy 5, 6, 7 years before I'd ever be at Ir David. And a couple of years ago, I looked at it and I'm like, wow, it's like, that's what I get to do. And just to be worthy of it is something that, I strive for, because I recognize, and I'm sure you both can feel it in the work that you do. You don't get to have a bad day. Right. To think that if because I didn't bring my A game, that somehow Yerushalayim suffered, that somehow someone who I met with that could have used their influence to help Yerushalayim, but because I just wasn't on my game, that they're not going to. I mean, how do you go to sleep at night?
Right.
it's
Ze'ev, you do a great job, and we're grateful Hashem answered those tefillos and put you in this position. I know that in addition to elected officials and media, there are Hollywood celebrities who you've taken a tour. Anyone jump out to you that you remember that are memorable? Give them a tour of Ir David.
I'm trying to think. I grew up as a big Chuck Norris fan. He came through, and he was, I watched Delta Force and all that kind of stuff, and he was super, super knowledgeable. Superman, Dean Cain.
Hold on, that's interesting. Chuck Norris was knowledgeable about the ancient city of Jerusalem.
I mean, about Tanakh, about Bible.
Wow. You can picture that. We have this image that like actors are so superficial and Hollywood people are just materialistic and into fame and power. But the real people.
I'll give you a flip side story. My oldest daughter, and this goes back years ago, she was very excited about some celebrity, Kat Graham. I don't know who she is. She's on some TV show, whatever. And somehow she came on some mission to Israel. And I even got her to say hi to my daughter. And my daughter was thrilled. And at the same time, a couple of years later, she joins like the BDS thing. And so you never know. But on the positive side, to talk about, another Boca area resident, Ben Shapiro, he spends a lot of time in Ir David. He just did something with Jordan Peterson. Be released at some point later this year. I don't know if I'm allowed to disclose any information, so I won't. But there's someone also, Jordan Peterson, who I was struck. Just say one thing about Jordan Peterson, who is leading intellectual today, certainly with young men and helping them kind of live more fulfilling lives. I have never met someone who has more, let's call it, fame and celebrity and renown. People will come, they'll do selfies and whatever. That he, was very, very into the Tanakh, the Bible, into the significance of Yerushalayim. But when a person would come up to him, and I saw this with my own daughter and with so many other people who came over to him, he stops, like the world stops, and he looks that person in the eye and just talks to them as if there's nothing else going on in the whole world. And I had the privilege, afterwards when no one was around and we were talking, and I said, it strikes me, we all talk about the idea that everyone's created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God, but how do we actually express that in a real way? And almost for the first time in my life, I saw someone do that, where he treated a total stranger, multiple total strangers, as if they were really created in the image of God. And you know what? If we really believe that someone was created in the image of God, you would give that person a lot more attention and a lot more respect and just be interested in what they had to say. And that was something that I learned from Jordan Peterson walking through Ir David.
Amazing. Ze'ev, thank you for taking time. You really enhanced our Yom Yerushalayim. I think all of us feel more connected, more inspired.
Can I say one last thing about Yerushalayim?
Yeah, please, of course.
And if we're talking about Yom Yerushalayim, is that Yerushalayim is to me a reminder not just of our glorious past, but that we still have a lot to do in the future. That when we talk about, it's very easy in the day-to-day of Jewish life, and we're talking about Jews, who are living affiliated Jewish lives, who are focused on whether it's making time to learn Torah, to keep Shabbat, to eat kosher, to do Chesed, to do all the amazing things that are happening in Boca and Jewish communities around the world. But how often do we stop and think, okay, but what's the big picture? What is the mission that we have as Jews, as part of Am Yisrael? What are we meant to do? Like, what's the big picture? What's the end game? And for me, the answer is Yerushalayim. Meaning, we talk about in Yeshayahu, Ki beiti beit tefillah yikra l'chol ha'amim, that Jerusalem will be a house of prayer for all nations. How do we create a world where when people want to look for meaning and purpose and inspiration, they're not looking to TikTok and they're not looking to quote unquote influencers, but that you're not going to go fly off to Davos for some conference about this or that all those conferences, they're going to take place in Yerushalayim, that the leaders of the world, they're going to say, you know what, we want to find inspiration, we want to find meaning, we want to find purpose, and not just purpose when it comes to spirituality, but we want to find purpose when it comes to how to run a country, how to have a strong economy that protects the weak people, how to have good environmental policy, how to have a strong military that's also moral. And everyone's going to come to Yerushalayim one day. I believe it. I believe that's our mission, to create that light unto the nations, that Chevra LaMofet, that is going to be a source of light for everyone. And whether you need to live in Yerushalayim or not to do that, okay, everyone can have their answer to that. But in terms of what we're aspiring towards, I think that's it. And I think in terms of celebrating Yom Yerushalayim, it's not just looking back and saying, it's amazing that we could visit the Kotel now, or it's Har Bayit B'Yadenu. All those things are great. But I think take a moment and just think about what is it as a community and as a nation that we're aspiring towards. Last story, I remember I was sitting at a Shabbat table at a Chabad family in Virginia. And I started talking to them about this idea. The couple happened to be not Jewish. And I said, look, when you look at all the woke progressive stuff that's going on around the world today, I said, I believe that Israel's meant to be that country where people can say, wait a second, there is an alternative. There is a different way to be. And I remember that the couple, they turned to me and they said, how close are you to being that? Like, we need it. Are you ready for? And I said, I'm like, not yet. I'm like, we're trying, we're working on it, hopefully soon, because the world needs it. Not only do we need it. You look in Breshit, Genesis 12:2 and 12:3. Hashem says to Avram in Lech Lecha, our purpose in the world is ve'ebracha, to be a blessing, right? We're meant to bless the world, right? Through you, the nations of the earth will be blessed. And that's what Yom Yerushalayim to me is all about, is saying, how close are we to fulfilling that purpose? Are we being a blessing to the world?
Thank you, Ze'ev. Thank you for all your passion and enthusiasm. Thank you for your hard work. And thank you for that charge. And those who've never been to your David, City of David, encourage you. You don't need a special pass. You don't need to have protexia. You don't need to have an inn. It's available. Go tour. Go check it out. Go back in time and to the future at the same time by checking out your David. You don't want to miss it. So wishing everyone a beautiful Yom Yerushalayim. Ze'ev, thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing to be in touch.
Thank you.
Beautiful Yom Yerushalayim to all. You heard it here first. The Heat taking the lead.
The Heat are taking the lead.
On evidence behind the Bima's live.
1 point lead.
You're Miami Heat. So take that, Celtics. Take that, Boston.
He just turned it on after a 13-point deficit.
Yeah. Right, bro. Do you know how basketball works?
No, I'm just watching the scores go up and down.
How many pass behind the Bima guests did Ze'ev reference? Did we get in there?
Lots.
Just want to say that, we mentioned Ben Shapiro tonight on our show, and it's possible he mentioned one of us on his show today.
Let's just say he mentioned one of us, and it definitely wasn't me.
Who got the bigger, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know.
The bigger deal?
I need some Ben Isaac's energy right now.
Exactly.
Should make a Ben Isaac's energy drink.
Exactly. Just put his face on that. He would love it.
Exactly. He'll just exude energy.
Yeah.
The best. Yeah. In any case, wishing everyone a very happy Yom Yerushalayim. Celebrate. Thank you to Hashem, whatever way, whatever words, however you do it, but don't let the day go by without being grateful and giving a huge thank you to the Ribbon Shalom, to the Almighty, to Hashem. Thank you, Ze'ev, and the people of Ir David, City of David, for the great work that you do. We love it.
Can't wait to go back.
Anything else, Rabbi Broide?
I'm thinking just even if you've been there before, go back again, because there's so much more that's been uncovered. Probably haven't seen it before.
Rabbi Broide, I sent you an article today that I saw.
I did see that.
Half of Americans say that their soulmate is their pet.
Yeah. Do you want to see my pet?
Now as a dog
right over there. I cannot tell you something.
45% tell
you don't feel this because you don't have a dog.
72% swear their pet can tell exactly how they feel at any point in time.
I agree with that. Yeah.
1 in 4 claim their pet can mirror their emotions. Where's the one about they think their pet gets them more than their spouse?
I'm not saying that. There's no, that's not true. But I'm just saying, when you open that door and you get that love, it's just amazing. That's what they say. Kelev is kol lev. It's all heart. Someone just told me that. I mean, kids are on their iPad and it's just like, hey, I'm home. They don't even hear you anymore. See, just remember, it wasn't so long ago. They didn't have these AirPods or whatever they put in their earpods, whatever they call them, where now they can't even hear you. Like, hello, anyone home? I'm home. No one hears anything.
Nobody cares.
But we do have this. This is something to care about. Partners. Partners is coming.
Partners is coming. Give one last plug for that.
One last plug. Thank you very much. And it's just the beginning of what we hope will be a very, very exciting program launching throughout the community. But the flagship, Boca Raton Synagogue, that's where it's all the magic is going to begin right after we test the program next week. So Come and join us.
Nice. All right. On that note, wishing everyone happy Yom Yerushalayim. Until next time, next week, the Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. We'll have to look up what that is exactly. But until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay holy.